Hello, my name is Lisa Helfand. I'm the Canadian ambassador to Hungary, Slovenia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. I've been in Budapest now for 2 years and have enjoyed it very much, dealing with all the many issues here and Canadian-Hungarian bilateral relations. I'm originally from Toronto, which is one of the most diverse cities in the entire world. But it wasn't always like that. When I grew up in Toronto, I was one of 2 Jewish children in a school of 2,000, and the other one was my sister. So I know what it's like to be a little bit different and to have come from a different ethnic background than people around. I was very lucky, had very good teachers who were very interested in introducing my ethnic background and the ethnic background of some of my friends from whose parents were from Japan and China to the class, so we could all be enriched by the experience. I'm very interested in the topic that you're going to be studying today. I think it's very important. One of the reasons I think it's important is because my parents, my father's family, actually his grandparents, and all his aunts and uncles and his cousins were murdered during the Holocaust. And I've often wondered what would have been different if their neighbors or their friends or their teachers and schoolmates had decided to try and intervene in some way. And I completely understand that in the circumstances, this would have been very, very difficult. But I've also wondered throughout my life what I would have done if I were one of those people, or in a similar situation where I saw that someone was being discriminated against because of their background, or was being harassed because of who they were. Because these events continue to take place around the world, in Hungary and in Canada. It's a situation that we could all run into every single day. My father and mother's family are from Poland, so they were living in communities that were quite mixed. We're probably about 40% Jewish and Polish, and there were ethnic German families there. It was quite a diverse area outside Warsaw in Radom. And they lived completely lives that are very, very similar to the lives we have today. They worked in tailor shops and sewing, journalists. My grandfather's family was very politically active. They went to school. And then, as we know, the Nazis occupied Poland and their lives became very difficult. We don't have a very clear picture of what happened after that, because the fact is that those who stayed in Poland were murdered, and they weren't able to tell their stories. So, and those who left are the ones who survived. And there was, in my family, there were no survivors. And sometimes we forget that that is actually the ordinary situation, because of course it's very important to hear survivors' stories, but to be a survivor was actually to be very unusual. And there were unfortunately no survivors in my family. One of the most important things about education is that you get to meet people from different backgrounds. And that's certainly something that I valued from my education. I think it's very difficult to understand other people's experiences if you don't get to meet with them and talk with them and even play on the football pitch with them. It's a very, very important part of growing up, and it's a fundamental way to understand other people's experiences, so you don't think of them as others, or in the worst case, that they're others and they're not human. And that's why I very much value the fact that this project allows you students from different backgrounds to sit together or to communicate with each other on social media and find out about each other's experiences and realize, yes, that you have some differences, but more than anything else, you share a great deal in common. Visual World Foundation has chosen 4 very diverse schools to participate in this unique and exciting education project. Congratulations to you all. The 4 schools are the Secondary School of Art, the primary school for the visually impaired, the Lauder Yavna Jewish Community School, and the Fezikash Mihai Primary and Secondary School. When we talk about situations of exclusion and discrimination, and in the worst case, genocide, we tend to focus on the perpetrators and the victims. What we haven't focused on that much is the role of the bystanders. And the bystanders can be the neighbors or schoolmates. They can just be people who are in a particular situation when an act of discrimination takes place. And in that situation, there are all kinds of questions that are running through the bystanders' heads. What should we do? Should we intervene? What would happen to me if I intervened? Am I going to put myself in danger? How much danger am I willing to put myself in to assist this person who I know, who I don't know? And these are all questions that are very helpful to think about in advance and work through the scenarios for when we face these situations in real life. And they're very important questions to ask ourselves. And they're not questions that are easy. Don't think that they're difficult for you because you're young. These are questions that adults and teachers find very, very difficult to deal with, and we don't always do the right thing. That's why it's important to think of them in advance. As part of this project, you're going to be looking at some very specific examples, particularly the Holocaust and the Rwandan genocide, which happened just 20 years ago. So certainly within my lifetime, if not in yours. But the people who were victims and were also the bystanders and the perpetrators in the Rwandan genocide are now just young adults today. So this isn't something long ago in ancient history. Similarly, there are still people who were around during World War II and during the Holocaust who are alive today, perhaps some of whom are in your own communities. The two situations we're talking about, these genocides, have had a huge, huge impact on world events, as well as, of course, on individual lives. Because what happens in these conflict situations have repercussions throughout the world, and these repercussions are negative in the extreme, because societies that have been in conflict are fragile societies, and societies where people can't prosper, they can't go to school, and they can't have their normal day-to-day activities. And that not just within the countries where they take place, but around the globe. You're very lucky that you have some excellent materials and online resources you can use in this particular project. One is from the Washington Holocaust Museum, which has some really interesting online information, some of which relates specifically to Hungary and what happened in the towns, cities, and villages that you know, people's individual experiences as victims and also as bystanders. There's a specific resource called Some Were Neighbors, and you can see from the title how it relates to the project that you're going to be engaged in. For example, I'm looking at Gratitude and Fear. A Polish Christian woman shelters 2 Jewish children while resenting them for putting her at risk. And I think that even that quote is very interesting, because here's someone who had to grapple with one of the most difficult decisions possible. She knew that by taking children in, she was putting not only herself at risk, but also her family members. So it shows the complexity of this situation and how difficult these situations are. On the Montreal Holocaust Museum's website, there is some very good first-hand information from General Dallaire, as well as interviews with other people who were in Rwanda at the time of the events. And you also have here a DVD that's based on his experience called Shake Hands with the Devil. It's also the title of a book that General Dallaire wrote on his experiences. And I really hope that you get inspiration from the writings and the words of these people who were involved during these events. I'd love to say that we live in a world where there aren't human rights violations, or even in countries where there aren't human rights violations or discrimination, but the fact is there is discrimination that continues today, both in Canada and in Hungary. We are faced with a situation that has existed for a few centuries now, where there's been discrimination against our First Nations people, which is the name that our Native peoples, or what's sometimes called Indians, like to call themselves. We are certainly living with the consequences of discrimination that has happened in the past and still exists today. The Canadian government is about to announce an inquiry into the situation of missing and murdered First Nations women, because First Nations women are murdered at a rate that's completely disproportionate to other women in society. Similarly, First Nations people are unfortunately imprisoned more often than other people in Canadian society. There are all kinds of roots and reasons for this that we are tackling. In order to do this, we have to look at our history in order that we could understand and deal with what's going on at the present time. Well, on a closing note, I'd like to wish you the best of luck with this very exciting project. I want to urge you to express yourselves freely when talking about these issues, but also to remember to be respectful in your words with other students and about other people, because how you express yourself matters. I really look forward to meeting with you when you've finished with the project and discussing with you what you've learned, how you've learned it, and the lessons that you're going to be taking forward after working on this project with your peers.